Hey everyone, today we are talking about the LOTMAXX Shark 3D printer. This printer has bicolor printing and an optional laser engraving kit that you can attach on too. So my 3D printer videos tend to be pretty long and have way too much information scattered about, so I'm going to break down the categories for this video and I'll give you timestamps in the comments if you want to skip around. First, I'll talk about my experience with 3D printers and where I think the LOTMAXX Shark fits into the market. Second, I'll talk about the unboxing, setup, and first impressions, and general thoughts on using the printer. Third, I'll go into the main features that make this printer stand out, such as the bicolor printing and laser engraver attachment. Lastly, I'll talk about if this is a good value and if I would buy this printer if I were looking for something in this category. So I've been interested in 3D printers for the better part of 8 years now. I used to 3D print using a Lulzbot, then moved up to a MakerBot. I've worked with industrial printers and even the cool resin-based Formlabs versions. I've even reviewed 2 3D printers already here on this channel. Now, I like 3D printers because I'm an engineer. I think they're a great way for me to build or design things on the computer for random stuff I might need around the house. Also a great way for me to print trinkets or toys that other much more talented CAD designers have built and print them out for my own enjoyment. The reason I say all of this is that my use case is much more limited than I think most people realize when they think of 3D printing. During the 3D printing craze a few years back, the future of 3D printing, clothing, food, computing devices even, in the comfort of our homes with the touch of a button seemed really close, but years later that future just couldn't seem further away. With this particular 3D printer, I view it as a hobbyist or enthusiast product. Maybe even a small business could use it to manufacture small plastic components that are needed for specific tasks. This LOTMAXX Shark is not a one-touch printer to give your kid like some printers on the market claim to be. And honestly, LOTMAXX's website makes the printer seem vaguely like it's intended for the mass market, but really, I don't think so. With the sacrifice of user experience or aesthetics, what you get is an extremely capable collection of hardware for a very manageable price. For about $440, you get the printer that comes with the dual extruder kit and auto leveler, which I will go into much more detail about soon. And then for an additional $50, you can add on a kit that adds the ability to do some rudimentary laser engraving to the existing hardware, which is pretty cool. When opening up the box, you see a largely pre-assembled printer that requires you to assemble the frame and connect some wires. You also must attach the filament holder and second extruder module. I actually tried for quite a while to get the printer up and running, thinking that I would be able to just start out and test with one extruder, then add the second after everything was set up, but no. It's actually software configured by default, where if you don't have the second extruder plugged in, you can't start prints that require only one kind of filament. That's a bit of a bummer. The next feature I ran into was the auto leveling software. Now, at this point in time, I find little benefit to having the auto leveler on. In order to use this properly, you must also manually level the bed, which is fine, but out of the box, the printer is configured to use auto leveling. So the typical 9-point leveling process that must be done completely manually has to be done using the slow touch interface to move the extruder all along the Y and X axis. Then once you have the bed leveled, you can run the leveling software to do what exactly? I already leveled it. So they say it can be used to calibrate the bed before every print, and it'll adjust the Z axis while it's printing. But I would have loved to see like a mechanical auto leveling surface where this head can detect the distance from the bed that the extruder is, then automatically turn the leveling knobs to account for the information it's received. It's super complicated, a solution that I definitely wouldn't expect in a printer of this price point, but as far as what I consider auto leveling, that's what that would be. I briefly touched on it before, but the 3.5-inch removable touchscreen is not the most responsive. It's a nice to have addition, don't get me wrong. But as you can see, moving between screens is slower than I'm used to. Finding and selecting the prints is pretty easy using the touchscreen, but one problem that I do get is that sometimes this printer, and this is going more into the software side of things, but sometimes this printer doesn't properly heat the bed or, start the heating of the extruder right away when I start a print. So I have to go in and manually adjust the temperature. And to do that while the print is starting and the screen being a little bit slower can be kind of stressful sometimes. The test prints that are included in the USB that comes with the printer didn't actually stick to the bed using their preset settings, but after some tweaking, eventually I was able to get most of their test prints able to print properly. Included with the printer is the software for printing, which is just Cura but reskinned, and also some laser engraving software on top of that. On Windows, I was able to get both the laser printing software and the printing software in the same bundle, but for some reason on Mac, it requires 2 separate applications. Most budget 3D printers will use some form of a Cura reskin just because it's so easy and widely accepted, and the laser engraving software is a little bit weird. There's some tweaking to do, some figuring out of the software, and it's not quite as polished as you can see, but it does get the job done after, enough dedication. I've used this printer on and off for the better part of 3 months now, and I definitely have a lot of thoughts about it, but it can be difficult to point out the unique pain points of using this printer just because the pain points that I do have are mainly the typical 3D printer pain points. Things like occasional filament jams and build plate adhesion were problems for me, often resulting in, large prints looking like this. I also found that I got layer shifting mid-print more frequently than I normally expect from a printer that's well leveled. Printing more slowly often resolves this though. The default and recommended printing speeds are often just too high, so I would get these issues due to wobbling for taller or more narrow prints that often resulted in failures and sometimes a stringy mess of filament all over the place. I mean, I've had plenty of failed prints before I was able to use this printer somewhat reliably. Sometimes the issues are caused by software and some weird oversights and some quirkiness in the way that the printer may or may not properly heat up before starting your print, but generally it is just typical lower end 3D printing type issues that you run into. One thing that I think really should have been avoided was that the extruder nozzle was not properly tightened out of the box, and it resulted in this buildup of filament around the extruder. So filament got everywhere, and it's not really something that's easy to fix because, I tightened the nozzle, but once there's filament and plastic in the threads, they'll never be completely gone. I've mentioned it quite a few times at this point, but it's a serious issue because for some reason in the software side of things, some of the prints just won't heat up. Like, they won't heat the extruder up until the print is already starting to go. So, it's trying to print and it's trying to shove the filament through the extruder, but it's not warm enough. And this is not great because you'll just be printing nothing for a while until the filament actually heats up. Plus, you'll end up messing with the filament. You're trying to jam it through there, and it's not good, and it's a weird oversight. It's just strange behavior that you need to watch out for, and something like this makes this much less of a plug-and-play printer. One minor thing, when you hit the pause button on this printer, it completes the layer before actually stopping. So if you need to clean something or get, some messy filament out of the way immediately, you'd have to stop the print, but then you can't easily resume it. Kind of strange too. As far as the quality of the prints, when it does work and everything is well aligned, this is a very good printer for the price. It's plenty capable of pushing out high quality prints. Lines are even, there's minimal stringiness if you're using the right type of filament, which means that the retraction works as expected. A lot of the prints that I modeled came out in the sizes and quality that I wanted given my input parameters. Also, the detachable bed is a great feature here, and I'd be disappointed in any printer that doesn't have one. Not a whole lot to say here other than that if you know what you're doing and you don't have any issues, the hardware is capable of making great prints. One huge upside about this printer is how versatile it is at the price point, with its ability to do multicolored printing and its ability to do laser engraving on top of that. Talking about the multicolored printing, it's not bad. It gets the job done and it works reasonably well. To get this done, you just have to configure the print file with 2 extruders and different filament in the reskinned Cura app. And then on the printer side of things, you do need to manually retract the filament on both sides a few centimeters above where you can see it. This is how the printer does bicolor with only one nozzle. It actually retracts the filament all the way when it needs to switch colors, and this does 2 things. It increases print time, and it also means that there are residual colors that leak into the parts that should be other colors unless you use the setting that makes this cylinder to clean itself out. This also takes more time and does waste a bit of filament. If you're dead set on bicolor printing, this does work and it's well priced for something that can do this, but it's on the slower side and you can tell that it's really having to work around not having 2 nozzles for extruding. Then with laser engraving, I actually found it hard to test due to how smoky the materials I had around got while laser engraving, and I'm in an apartment with no space to print in a garage or anything like that. To attach the laser engraver, you need to disconnect the auto leveler and swap in the laser head. They connect in the same spot. So it takes a few minutes and actually adds a lot of weight to the extruder, so I definitely recommend disconnecting this when you go back to printing. I didn't want to get any footage because of how bright it was and I didn't want to damage my lens, but they do include glasses for you so you don't hurt your eyes too much, and also it produces a very strong burning smell that does linger. Additionally, the software was a bit thrown together and calibration of the laser itself was not that intuitive. I think this can be seen as a decent add-on feature, but if you really want good laser engraving or cutting, you just need to get something dedicated. Overall, I think this printer can be a good value if you're a very particular type of person. If you will really appreciate using a printer that you can tinker around with, and it also has the ability to do some pretty cool stuff like bicolor printing and even laser engraving if you really want it, you'll likely learn to love this printer like I have. You'll be ready to take on the challenges with getting this thing up and running smoothly, and you're also not somebody who is annoyed when the instructions to do things for configuration and setup are difficult to follow or not even existent. This printer is very capable and pretty good hardware, and then super versatile at this price point. On the other end, if you're looking for something more general consumer friendly, I'd recommend looking elsewhere. You're not going to be missing out on too much by getting a printer that just has one extruder or can only print in one color, and you'll likely be able to get a lot more use out of the hardware you purchase. In any case, I'm going to link to this printer and some other popular printers in the links down below, so definitely check those out if you're in the market. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you again soon. Later.